Everyone, welcome to BYD Classes and welcome to the second session of the Mains 365 of Internal Security for 2023 UPSC exam. So let's begin. So first is terrorism. And what is terrorism? That terrorism is a forceful and unlawful method to achieve the desired goal. Antithesis of independence. As per Global Terrorism Index 2023, India ranked 13th on the index, which is topped by the Afghanistan. And what are the factors that causes terrorism? Radical ideology like left-wing communism, right-wing capitalism, and religious ideology, and ethnic or nationalist aspirations or self-determination or autonomy, such as separatist movement. Globalization facilitates terrorism through increased mobility and communication. And terrorism as foreign policy. Terrorism has come to be an alternative to war amongst adversarial states and poor societies with weak state structure, and international injustice fuels feelings of a desire for revenge. For example, rise of ISIS. What are the challenges to counter international terrorism? Lack of comprehensive international legal framework. Because of lack of coordination among the states or the top delegations department, and ambiguity around definition of terrorism, as there is no internationally agreed definition of terrorism or no international standard definition of terrorism is designated. So remember this. Inadequate domestic capacity of the nation and restriction of civic freedoms. 2019 Human Rights Council report has shown how counterterrorism measures adversely impacts civic space, and lack of effectively counter the financing of terrorism. Global initiatives to counter terrorism. United Nations Global Counterterrorism Strategy 2006 and UN Security Council Counterterrorism Committee was established, that under it tasked with monitoring implementation of Resolution 1373 2001 to enhance ability to counter terrorist activities. The Global Counterterrorism Forum is an informal, apolitical, multilateral platform. India is a member. United Nations Countering Terrorist Travel Program, Financial Action Task Force for Anti-Money Laundering and Countering the Financing of Terrorism, and Shanghai Cooperation Organization Regional Anti-Terrorist Structure. Proposed Comprehensive Convention on International Terrorism intends to criminalize all forms of international terrorism. And No Money for Terror conference started by French government. India hosted its third edition of international terrorism. And next, what are the initiatives by India to counter terrorism? UAPA 1967, that is Unlawful Activities Prevention Act 1967, and establishment of National Investigation Agency NIA, and for the investigative cases of national terrorist activities, and National Intelligence Grid or NAT grid, and creation of two new divisions within Ministry of Home Affairs, such as Counter-Terrorism and Counter-Radicalization Division and Cyber and Security Division. Bilateral or regional collaborations for counter-terrorism. And India implemented UNSC Resolution 2396 to stem threats posed by foreign terrorist fighters by using biometric screening at ports of entry. And what are the solutions to counter the international or national terrorism? To enhance state capacity and identify gaps to prevent and combat terrorism, and focus on role of regional and international organizations in addressing state capacity, share best practices, improve compliance with international norms and obligations, including a gender perspective in counterterrorism, because the gender perspective norms is backward in many countries. Okay, and protect human rights and fundamental freedoms in the context of counterterrorism measures, raising public awareness about the threat of terrorism and about universal counterterrorism instruments. And next is lone wolf attack. Experts have raised concerns about growing threat of lone wolf terrorism in India. What is lone wolf terrorism? Violent terror attacks by extremist individuals acting upon their radicalized beliefs. So remember this, the individual attacked on the crowding areas, okay, and it is mainly a violent terror attacks by an extremist individuals upon their radicalized beliefs. And what is the motives behind the lone wolf attack? Their actions are either inspired or influenced by a specific terrorist organization and ideology, or operate within a particular social atmosphere and activities. They are different in nature from organized or networked terror attacks like the 9/11 attack in US or 26/11 Mumbai terror attack, ranging from threatening and intimidating people to indiscriminate shootings, vehicle ramming, stabbing, and suicide bombing. Lone wolf terror attacks have become a grave threat. Remember this, what are the challenges associated with lone wolf attack? The unpredictable nature. As a result, counterterrorism agencies, police, and intelligence organizations have found it challenging to tackle and use of internet. Internet provides lone wolves with the anonymity to communicate and easy to carry out. Such attacks are becoming logistically simple. Lone wolves inspire copycat behavior, become role models for other alienated youngsters, and often invite bandwagon attacks. Okay, and what are the measures required to counter lone wolf terrorism? First is diverse policy measures addressing the different nuances of terrorism and capacity building measures. Strong technical intelligence capacities like social media and cyberspace monitoring, contingency plans by the intelligence and counterterrorism structures, and de-radicalization and counter-radicalization strategies, regular revision and tightening of laws, community engagement, professional counselors and psychologists. Next is strengthening international cooperation, strengthen countermeasures for finance of terrorism. Okay, and what makes India vulnerable to lone wolf attacks? Possibility of Pakistan using it as a tool to advance its state-sponsored terrorism against India, and groups like IAS visualize India's democratic, secular, and open social fabric as a threat to their concept of an Islamic caliphate, and heavy concentration of people in public areas offers a large number of potential targets. fast growing population, especially youth, with access to mass media and social media, opens limitless avenues of unrestrained radical propaganda. And role of technology in amplifying terrorism. First is social media. Estimates suggest that in 2016 social media platforms played a role in 90% of the radicalization cases because of lone wolf attack and 3D printing. Use of online manuals and a 3D printer to print parts of gun. Autonomous vehicles, turning vehicles into a remote controlled weapon, and drones, using drones for intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance reconnaissance missions, and conducting attacks with drones carrying explosives. Artificial intelligence will enhance cyber attacks and digital disinformation campaigns and can target vulnerable youth in many new ways. And metaverse, the estimates will be able to do preemptive reconnaissance missions in virtual world before engaging in the physical attacks. Steps taken by India to deal with lone wolf terrorism. Difficult to obtain weapons, unlike in US where sophisticated weapons can be easily bought by ordinary citizens. Gaining access to such weaponry in India is difficult as is ability to obtain licenses. State supervised counseling initiatives like Kerala's Operation Pigeon. So remember this. Next is bioterrorism. What is bioterrorism? Bioterrorism is a planned and deliberate use of pathogenic strains of microorganisms such as bacteria, viruses to spread life-threatening diseases on a mass scale in order to devastate the population of an area. And what is the execution of bioterrorism? These agents are diverted by Scud missiles, motor vehicles with spray, hand pump sprays, book or letter, guns, remote control, robots, etc. And what is the context recently? With biological warfare being recognized as a looming threat to the world, Indo-US joint exercise Tarkus has for the first time included response to biological terror attacks. Bioterrorism agents. What are bioterrorism agents? Bioterrorism agents categorized into three sections such as category A, category B and category C. Under category A, high priority agents that pose a risk to national security because they can be easily disseminated or transmitted from person to person, result in high mortality rates. For example, anthrax by Bacillus anthracis. And category B, under category B, the second highest priority agents include Brucella species and glanders, Burkholderia molly. And under category C, these include emerging pathogens that could be engineered for mass dissemination in the future. For example, emerging infectious diseases such as Nipah virus and Hanta virus. A need for bioterrorism law in India. So remember this: India's high vulnerability related to bioterrorism. High population density because of vulnerable, that is high population density, inadequate medical facilities, subtropical climatic conditions make India extremely susceptible for such attacks, and it is often difficult to monitor the origin of such disease or attacks. and control its impact on society. Biologic weapons can cause large-scale mortality and morbidity in large populations and create civil disruption. To control excess, advancement in biotechnology and nanotechnology has created an easy accessibility to more sophisticated biologic agents apart from the conventional bacteria, viruses and toxins. Mechanism to counter bioterrorism. The deterrence bylaw through need to introduce public health bill on the line of public health like prevention, control and management of epidemics, bioterrorism and disaster bill 2017, which defined terms epidemic, isolation, quarantine and social distancing but lapsed, and prevention thoroughly examining the risk of bioterror attacks, preparation and training of law enforcement personnel and the related legal and political framework for the enhanced intelligence and surveillance and assessment by recognizing patterns of non-specific syndromes and assessing them that could indicate the early manifestations of a biological warfare attacks. Laboratory investigation need to develop both laboratory and institution-wide response plans for diagnosis and characterization of the biological organism and medical management. It should include preventive, promotive and curative services like chemoprevention to prevent the spread of the disease, general public sensitization through training and education, warning network at hospitals and public health agencies. So remember this. And these are the some Indian measures to counter bioterrorism, such as Epidemic Diseases Act of 1897 and model instrument proposed by NDMA calls for participation of both public and private sector in handling biological disaster and integrated disease surveillance project and international measures to counter bioterrorism, and that is Biological Weapons Convention and Interpol Bioterrorism Prevention Unit and Cartagena Protocol on Biosafety. So remember these facts. And next is UAPA 1967, that is Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. Recently, Supreme Court declared that mere membership of a banned organization will be a crime under Unlawful Activities Prevention Act 1967. Overruling the 2011 judgments, the Supreme Court said that a person who is or continues to be even a mere member of a banned organization is criminally liable under UAPA. So both group as well as an individual can be taken under this act, that UAPA can be implemented on group or an individual for acting against the sovereignty and integrity of India. In 2011, three separatist judgments, State of Kerala versus Ranif Arup Bhuyan versus State of Assam and Sri Indra Das versus State of Assam, Supreme Court had ruled that mere membership of a banned organization is not sufficient to constitute an offence unless it is accompanied with some overt violence. Restored the doctrine of guilt by association. Doctrine of guilt by association is defined as guilty ascribed to someone not because of any evidence but because of their association with an offender who is guilty. It is also known as association fallacy. Next is the affirmed the constitutional validity of Section 10, Clause A, subclause I of UAPA 1967. This section makes continued membership of a banned organization a crime punishable with a jail term up to 2 years, and such person may also be liable to fine. And Supreme Court held that Section 10 clauses subclause I is absolutely in consonance with 19(1)(a) and 19 clause 2 of the Constitution under the freedom of expression, free speech and expression, and thus in consonance with the objectives of UAPA. And Supreme Court also observed that unlike the US, the right to freedom of speech in India is not an absolute right. It is subject to reasonable restrictions. That is, 6 reasonable restrictions are included in it, that such as the law and order, public order, integrity, unity and integrity of the nation, etc. Okay. Next is declaration of an association as unlawful. Under Section 3 of UAPA, if the central government is of opinion that any association is or has become an unlawful association, it may, by notification in the official gazette, declare such association to be unlawful. And what is Unlawful Activities Prevention Act 1967? So this is the static portion. You can pause the video and read one time. Okay. So this is the UAPA. And what are other anti-terror laws, such as Gujarat Control of Organized Crime Act 2019 in force, Terrorist and Disruptive Activities Prevention Act 1987 repealed in 2004, and Prevention of Terrorism Act 2002 POTA repeated in 2004, and Maharashtra Control of Organized Crime Act 1999 in force, and Gujarat Control of Organized Crime Act 2019 in the force. Okay, so remember this. Next is issues with UAPA. Broad definition of terrorist act. No objective criteria has been laid for categorization of an individual as a terrorist. Unclear definition of terrorist leads to stigmatization of those inappropriately labeled as terrorists. Mislabeling dilutes efforts to combat actual terrorism. In violation of federalism principle, that NIA's suo motu power through the central government or Ministry of Home Affairs to transfer investigation from the state police is seen as a violation of federalism. And low conviction rate under UAPA. Based on the National Crime Record Bureau annual reports during 2015 to 20, only 3.6% of cases registered UAPA cases resulted in conviction. And issues with recent judgment. It is silent on procedure to find who is member of such banned organizations and what are the solutions to counter the terrorism under the UAPA. The safeguards against misuse. The different agencies of a state should ensure that due process of law is applied while dealing with the various cases under this legislation. Need for a central agency for overseeing evidence collection so as to aid the investigation process, especially when cases need to connect dots across the borders. And police reforms, which should include sensitization in terms of community, religion, and should work towards decreasing the massive arbitrary powers that the police hold. The comprehensions for innocent individuals. Compensation should be provided to those individuals who were detained under the UAPA for a significant amount of time and proven innocent. And protection of political dissent. As political dissent is a fundamental right, legislations relating to protection of political dissent should be passed in order to proper, properly define what constitutes political dissent. So remember this. Next is emerging dimensions of warfare. Under this, the hybrid warfare. What is hybrid warfare? An interplay or fusion of conventional as well as unconventional instruments of power and tools of subversion. So these can be used in the hybrid warfare, and these instruments or tools are blended in a synchronized manner to exploit the vulnerabilities. And it is an emerging global challenge amid the Russia-Ukraine war and has given rise to the need to develop national capabilities. What are the key domains of hybrid warfare? That is political warfare. Under political warfare, interference in the political activities of the countries to their detriment, and technological warfare, using technological capabilities to inflict harm or entities, and militant military warfare, the action such as use of improvised explosive guerrilla warfare, and economic warfare to weaken the economy by disrupting the supply chains, introducing counterfeit currency, and social warfare, exploring already prevalent social issues and vulnerabilities via propaganda. Next is regions for growth of hybrid warfare. The hybrid warfare domains are usually overlooked in traditional threat assessments. Target areas are highly vulnerable where maximum damage can be caused. Involves state or non-state actors or both, including indulging in different roles in a synchronized manner. And scale and target of the attack can be precisely controlled by stating below certain detection and response threshold. And hybrid warfare campaign may not be discovered until it is already well underway. And associated issues for India about hybrid warfare encourages new forms of terrorism such as lone wolf attacks, hybrid militants, creation of sleeper cell that are difficult to detect, and cyber attacks, privacy and personal data theft, insecure framework of mobile apps, cyber espionage issue with China and Pakistan, and interference in electoral processes through media and social media campaign, and using disinformation and fake news to create a parallel reality and fuel social fragmentation, and financial influences through investments like in unfavorable energy supply deals. And ways to combat hybrid warfare: systematic and synchronized real-time response, the institutional mechanism to ensure nimble response and effective coordination between the different response domains, and use of intelligence tools like real-time situational awareness, and institutional measures. Under institutional measures that conduct a self-assessment of critical functions and vulnerabilities, and enhance traditional threat assessment activities, strengthening the safety of digital ecosystems to make it more secure and robust, strengthening our democracy within the inclusion of civil society institutions to counter such threats, and investing in journalism to raise media literacy, and developing international cooperation, developing clear definitions and protocols, and institutionalizing intervention stages and methods, and mainstreaming and integrating the issue of hybrid warfare in the prevalent security dialogue. So remember this. Next is space weaponization. What is this? Under space weaponization includes placing weapons in outer space or on heavily bodies, as well as creating weapons that will destroy targets in space. In space, weaponization is different from the militarization of space that assist armies on the conventional battlefield. So remember this under difference between space weaponization and military of weaponization of the space. Lack of faith in the present missile defense system to stall an incoming intercontinental ballistic missile ICBM armed with a nuclear warhead and to preserve on satellites in space against other anti-satellite weapons. It would give supremacy to a country in the conduct of war over the land, sea, and air, and insufficient existing treaties like OST means operating system technology and implications of space weaponization like fear of war. It would create an environment of uncertainty, suspicion, suggestive deployment between nations which may lead to war and against commercial and scientific interests. It would put at risk the entire range of commercial satellites as well as those involved in scientific explorations and rise in space debris. This can even trigger Kessler syndrome. What is Kessler syndrome? The presence of space debris or the electronic or things in the space around the Earth's orbit. And Earth-based critical infrastructure will be impacted. Peaceful exploration of outer space will be impacted and narrowing already scare radio frequencies and orbital slots. So remember this. And steps taken to prevent weaponization of space. Under global efforts of space weaponization, Outer Space Treaty. It emphasizes that exploration of outer space should be for free, peaceful purposes and claims that one nation cannot claim national sovereignty in outer space. Prevention of an outer space arms race for using space for peaceful purposes, avoiding an arms race. Partial test ban treaty and other initiatives such as Russian proposal of prevention of placement of weapons in outer space and threat, and European Space Agency's code and US Artemis Accords. Now India is also its member, and steps taken by India to prevent outer space weaponization. Mission Defense Space to develop innovative solutions for defense requirements in the space domain, and Mission Shakti, that anti-satellite mission launched by India. Defense Space Agency, Tri-Agency of Indian Armed Forces, and Defense Space Research Agency creating space warfare, weapon systems and technologies, and navigation with Indian constellation that is Navik, and in SpaceX simulated space warfare exercise. So remember this. And what are the solutions or way forward to tackle the space weaponization? Need of legal framework to address momentum towards the weaponization of outer space, legitimate access for all states to outer space, and transfer of technology and cooperation among nations should be promoted. Transparency and confidence building measures can help maintain space security, and treating space as global common like Antarctica, developing dual use platforms for deterrence purpose, secure satellite assisted communications by utilizing quantum key distribution technology, and strengthen space based intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. And for India, need for well defined national space and defense space strategy, pass resolution on draft space activities bill. So remember this. And next is security challenges and their management in border areas. So first is security issues in border areas. What are the challenges along the border between India and China? Border disputes at Aksai in Arunachal Pradesh, Doklam with sporadic aggression and large-scale smuggling of Chinese electronic and other consumer goods, inadequate infrastructure due to difficult terrorism and multiple forces such as Indo-Tibetan Border Police Force, Assam Rifles, Special Frontier Force, creating coordination issues and water sharing issues and challenges between India and Pakistan. Border dispute at Sar Creek and Kashmir, and river water sharing issue at Indus River, infiltration and cross-border terrorism, diverse terrain including desert, marshes, snow-capped mountain and plains, time and cost overruns in infrastructure projects. Other issues include drug smuggling, arms trafficking, etc. And India, Nepal, encouraging extremism and anti-Indian activities, fear of spread of Maoist insurgency due to links of Nepal's Maoists in India, easy escape and illegal activities such as smuggling, fake Indian currency, and land grabbing on each side of the border, Chinese investment in core sector of Nepal, and challenges between India and Bhutan, insurgency because of insurgency or Maoism in northeast and smuggling of goods such as Bhutanese cannabis, free movement of people and vehicle, and challenges under the India-Myanmar, challenges between India and Myanmar, free movement regime, that is drug smuggling and human trafficking, and drug trafficking due to proximity to Golden Triangle, no physical barrier along the border, and poor infrastructure facilities. India, Bangladesh, water disputes with regard to Tista River, Barak River, and illegal migration, inadequate border fencing, smuggling of goods like Jamdani saris. And these are the initiatives taken between India and China. The creating infrastructure to cut down time for troop movement and development of northeastern region, army infrastructure projects within 100 km of LAC have been exempted from forest clearance, and empowering border roads organization to develop border road on priority, vibrant village programs for border village development, and working mechanism for consultation and coordination. So remember this, and initiatives taken between India and Pakistan to counter the terrorism or the security issues in border areas. Initiated between India and Pakistan, that implementation of comprehensive management system to establish an integrated security system, and deploying National Security Guard (NSG) commandos in Jammu and Kashmir, and demand of amendment of Indus Water Treaty 1960. So remember, and between India and Nepal, initiatives to tackle the challenges, establishment of a new intelligence section in SSB to ensure better operational efficiency, establishment of border district coordination committee and development aid to Nepal, and joint working group on border management and Fatehpur border outpost. Next is between India and Bhutan. India-Bhutan Group on Border Management and Security, cooperation with Bhutan's army to prevent sanctuary to insurgent, and establishing new border posts in Sikkim, and general approval for the diversion of forest land for major infrastructure projects. And between India and Myanmar, Cabinet recently proposed to set up 13 new integrated checkposts to encourage India's engagement with SAARC countries along with Thailand and Myanmar. Free movement regime within 16 kilometers on both sides of the border. India-Bangladesh. India-Bangladesh Land Boundary Agreement 2015. Establishment of Border Protection Grid. Installation of border surveillance devices such as drones, and raising awareness among the locals regarding crime prevention, and joint river commission for solving river water disputes, and comprehensive integrated border management system for border. So remember this. And role of community in border management. Recently, Prime Minister called every village at the border as the first village of the country, and people residing near the border as country's strong guard, thus highlighting role of local population in border management and importance of community engagement in border management to ensure a secure and safe border. It would help enhancing security and development of borders besides providing a sense of belonging to these people. Improved situational awareness. Border communities hold vast amounts of intimate knowledge on the areas, characteristics of the terrain, and enhanced surveillance. Indian Navy and Indian Coast Guard regularly conduct community interaction programs for fishermen in coastal villages wherein they are sensitized about safety and security issues. To uphold human rights, community involvement helps in ensuring that security responses do not compromise human rights or inhibit unduly the free movement of goods and people. Utilization of community mechanisms. Improved interaction with local populations would allow gradual development of a new community based policing approach to border management. What are the challenges in border management? Inadequate state capacity, poor or non-existent border infrastructure, and basic equipment for transport, communication, and security control is missing or control be maintained. Law enforcement personnel are badly paid and inadequate trained. An alienation of border communities. India's border population in general quite often feel dissatisfied, alienated, and show hostile attitude towards border security forces. For instance, prevention of smuggling activities leads to a perceived feeling that authorities unnecessarily interfere in the means of livelihood of local populace, and border fencing and connected problems. The construction of the fencing has also generated many differences between the local villages and border authorities. An agitation approach local population because of various reasons including hidden economic benefits, social pressure comes in support of criminals with vested interests, and lacuna in mechanisms. In many cases, cooperation between border communities and authorities already exists, but often in an ad hoc and informal way. This makes them unreliable and slow. And measures to integrate local communities in border management, taking into account local characteristics. Frameworks based on the local characteristics can be established on create a climate of trust between the authorities and the communities, improving understanding of border community by providing adequate security, improving basic amenities and village conditions, and assisting in generating employment opportunities. Political will to replace the concept of border guarding by border management at ground level. The responsibility has to be shared by the central as well as state governments, and improving the community relations ability of border personnel. In systematic appraisal of the grievance redressal mechanism against the force personnel, and learn local language, respect weapon, hope elderly persons, and respect local customs, and carrying out civic action programs, sports activities, judicious utilization of border population grounds. Next is geospatial data and national security. About geospatial data, What is geospatial data? It is an information that describes objects, events, or other features with a location on or near the surface of the earth and captured using the photogrammetry, lidar, radar, satellite-based remote sensing, and combines three types of information such as location information, usually coordinates on the earth, attribute information, characteristics of the objects, events, and temporal information, that is under time or lifespan at which the location and attribute exists. What are the significance of geospatial data in national security of India? Enhancing the precision and reliability of intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance activities, and advancing situational awareness for quick and secure decision making, and supporting military operation in logistics management, developing tactical plans, and tackling new and emerging threats like cyber attacks, hybrid warfare, and modernizing security operation, for example, crime prediction and precision guided munitions, and securing the Indian Ocean region by improving nation maritime domain awareness capabilities and build progressive defense and security partnership. For example, BECA agreement between India and the USA. Steps taken by India to develop its geospatial capabilities. Policy framework National Geospatial Policy 2022. Under this, the national map policy to regulate geographic information and building a constellation of Earth observation satellites and establishment of dedicated institutions like Indian Institute of Remote Sensing and National Spatial Data Infrastructure like Bharat Maps Patterns Platform and Bhuvan Portal, and India's indigenous navigation system Navik, and geospatial data gathering as a part of schemes in initiatives like PM Gati Shakti and Swamitwa. And what are the challenges in utilization geospatial data in national security of India? Lack of access to comprehensive and accurate data, and research outputs are usually stand alone and lack unanimity, and shortage of trained human resources in government agencies, and financial constraints in technological adoption and advancement in geospatial analytics, and ensuring secure storage of geospatial data given India's vulnerable digital ecosystem. Coordination issues due to lack of clarity on data sharing with lower levels of governance, and lack of indigenous software and hardware technology, and privacy concern due to lack of location privacy and confidentiality in India. What are the solutions on way forward? Bringing comprehensive to the geospatial sector by enhancing collaboration between government, academia, and industry, and awareness and capability building among decision makers and users, and strengthening the security of digital infrastructure, and promote the development of indigenous software and hardware, and promoting education in specialized fields like geoinformatics, big data analytics, and enhancing coordination among agencies like state police, defense, and intelligence bureau, and creation of a dedicated department of better utilization of geospatial data and ensuring the privacy of citizens. Next is maritime security. What is maritime security? Maritime security classifies issues in the maritime domain comprising national security, marine environment, economic development, and human security. And India recently chaired UN Security Council high-level open debate on enhancing maritime security, a case for international cooperation. So remember this. What are the significance of maritime security in India? Plays an important part in India's economic development with a direct bearing on areas like trade, fish production, and strategic mineral exploration, and fulfilling India's geo-strategic interest in the Indian Ocean region, such as countering Chinese influence, becoming a threat a net security provider and executing human assistance and disaster response operations, dealing with climate-induced crises such as rising sea level and environmental degradation due to developmental activities, and coastal area security, preventing incidents like 26/11 Mumbai terror attack. And what are the challenges to maritime security? Privacy and maritime terrorism in the Indian Ocean region, and transactional organized crimes like smuggling and trafficking, and maritime cyber threats targeting maritime infrastructure vessels or maritime supply chains, and protecting the marine environment and addressing environmental challenges such as oil spills, pollution, and climate change, and illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing activities pose economic challenges, and maritime border disputes with neighboring countries such as Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and maritime infrastructure development requires substantial investments, lackadaisical approach of state governments resulting in slow pace of coastal infrastructure development, and issues in security framework, fragmented approach and overlapping jurisdiction, and rising influence of USA and China like Chinese dual use facilities in Myanmar and Sri Lanka, and steps taken by India. India has become a nuclear triad country by inducting nuclear SSBN, INS Arihant and aircraft carrier INS Vikrant, and regional cooperation through initiatives like Security and Growth for All in the Region, Sagar, Indian Ocean Rim Association, and Indian Ocean Naval Symposium, establishment of an international fusion center for maritime domain awareness on safety and security issues, and coastal security scheme by the Ministry of Home Affairs to strengthen the patrolling and surveillance, utilizing soft power like Project Mosam to reconnect with littoral countries, and promoting sustainability such as Blue Economy Initiative and infrastructure development initiatives like Sagarmala, and humanitarian assistance and disaster relief initiatives like Vaccine Matri, and international cooperation like cooperation with Bahrain-based Combined Maritime Force. And what are the way forward or solutions to tackle the maritime security? 5-point framework for maritime security by India highlighting free maritime trade, settlement of maritime disputes, responsible maritime connectivity, combat maritime threats, preserve the maritime environment must be implemented in letter and spirit. Cooperation among countries by implementing the international treaties like in UN clause, that is United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, emphasizing on leveraging technology for modernization on navy, and confidence building measures with island and littoral nations, means island nations. Next is the Anti-Maritime Piracy Act. Recently, Anti-Maritime Piracy Bill 2019 was given assent by the President. What is piracy? An illegal act of violence or detention or any act of depredation committed for private ends by any person or by the crew or any passenger of a private ship and directed on the high seas against another ship or any person or property on board such ship. So remember this. Okay, and inciting or intentionally facilitating such acts and voluntary participation in the operations of a pirate ship or aircraft also amounts to an act of piracy. And applicable regions, that is in exclusive economic zones like high seas, which which includes exclusive economic zones and all waters beyond the jurisdiction of any other states, and piracy and extraditable offense. The accused can be transferred to any country for prosecution with which India has signed an extradition treaty and designated courts. Central government, in consultation with the Chief Justice of concerned High Court, will specify certain courts as designated courts for speedy trial of offences of piracy, and authorized personnel. Only authorized personnel are allowed to carry out arrest and seizure of the pirate ships and disposing the seized property. Ship or property seized will be disposed of only by a court order, and concerns associated with the act. Death penalty. The provision of death penalty as a punishment for an act or attempt of piracy is against the Supreme Court's directive of rarest of rare case, as it violates Article 14 and 21, and lack of clarity. The lack of clarity over what acts would amount to helping in piracy, and extradition difficulties, that presumption of guilt of accused in case certain conditions are satisfied. So you can remember this, and these are the measures taken to deal with the piracy at the sea. Since 2008, naval escort in provided by Indian naval ships to vessels of Indian origin and other countries in the Gulf of Aden. An intermaritime ministerial group has been set up by the government under the Ministry of Shipping to deal with the hostage situation arising out of hijacking at sea of merchant vessels with Indian crew, and government has constituted a committee of secretaries on anti-piracy and hijacking at sea COSAP under the chairmanship of Cabinet Secretary, and contingency plan for dealing with piracy and hijacking of merchant ships. The government has also approved the National Maritime Domain Awareness Project. The project will subsume the existing Naval Information Management and Analysis Center at Gurugram, which takes feeds from multiple sources ranging from coastal radars to satellite. It will function as an integrated intelligence grid to detect and thwart threats emanating from sea in real time, and is expected to provide actionable intelligence on maritime threat. So remember this. Okay, next is a conclusion. Having a piracy-free Indian Ocean region is essential for the growth of maritime trade in the region, and this will also help India to establish its regional supremacy. And what are the strategic development of Andaman and Nicobar Islands? So strategic development, importance of strategic development of Andaman and Nicobar Island, securing sea lanes of communications, encountering increasing Chinese presence, and net security provider. Okay, challenges in Andaman Nicobar Island strategic development, such as wrong perception in region, turning ANI into a strategic military hub might not sit well with Southeast Asian countries who perceive India to be benevolent and benign power. Slow pace of development, internet connectivity, road building, airstrip construction, and even the building of jetties has been slow or non-existent, and institutional reluctance towards allowing port visits to the NI by foreign navies in general and the US Navy in particular, and ecological fragility. Establishing a credible aerial and naval presence in this ecological fragile and ethnographically extremely sensitive region presents complex challenges. So these are the challenges and development initiatives taken in Andaman Nicobar Islands, such as Maritime Hub. In 2015, the government announced plan to develop the islands into the country's first maritime hub to develop facilities such as telecommunications, electricity, and water. Next is the declining protectionism. In 2019, a new island coastal regulation zone notification was promulgated, allowing land reclamation for ports, harbors, and jetties. Allowing such projects will help in creating strategic infrastructure and maritime exercises. Indian Navy conducts joint military exercises such as Singapore India Maritime Bilateral Exercise Milan and coordinated patrols with Myanmar, Thailand, and Indonesia, and expanding naval presence. Following the Ladakh standoff with China in Myanmar in May 2020, India is expediting plans for stationing additional forces, warships, aircraft, and missile batteries in the ANI and others. The Chennai, Andaman, and Nicobar undersea intent cable was inaugurated to provide high-speed internet connectivity to 7 remote islands of ANI chain. And in 2010, India and Indonesia set up a special task force to enhance connectivity between the ANI and the port of Sabang in SC to promote trade, tourism, and people-to-people contact. And what are the solutions? Encouraging migrations. There is a need to consider encouraging migration for the mainland and open up some of the strategically located uninhabited islands and strategic infrastructure. In a bid to emphasize its regional preeminence, the Indian Navy in recent times has raised the tempo of naval operations in the Bay of Bengal, highlighting India's combat prowess and cooperation with the strategic partners by US, Japan, Australia, France, or UK can lead to further graded cooperation in all the dimensions and engagement with ASEAN lies an opportunity to make ANI an important element of active policy of engaging with countries in the region east of India. Next is the security forces. So first is security forces in India. Structure of security forces in India. Under Defense Military, Army, Air Force, Indian Coast Guard and Navy, and under Home Ministry, they are Central Armed Police Force or CAPF, Border Security Force, Central Industrial Security Force, Central Reserve Police Force, Indo-Tibetan Border Police Force, and Rashtra Seema Bal and Assam Rifles. So remember this. And National Security Guard, National Investigation Agency, and Special Protection Groups. These comes under the Ministry of Home Affairs and under Ministry of Defense, under Army, Air Force, Navy, and Indian Coast Guards. And what are the challenges of security forces? Bureaucratization of Central Armed Police Force, high vacancies and lack of promotional prospects, and shortages of arms and ammunition, difficult terrain operation like Himalayan region in the case of Indo-Tibetan Border Police Force, and poor intelligence gathering and analysis leads to smuggling, rise of insurgency at border, and over the ground supporter like for Naxalite, Maoist sympathizer, hybrid militants in Jammu and Kashmir. Role of various security forces. This is the static portion, so you can remember on its own. Okay. And what are the steps taken by India to strengthen the security structure? Modernization of armed forces involves the acquisition of platforms, technologies, and use of wide range of emerging technologies like drones in the left-wing extremism operation, and Armed Forces Special Powers Act, that is ASPA, for disturbed areas of Jammu and Kashmir and northeastern states, and smart border fencing like CIBMS for Indo-Bangladesh border, and to bring the human face of security through special programs like Civic Action Program and legislative changes like NIA Amendment Act 2019 and National Intelligence Grid Net Grid services available to 11 central agencies and police of all states and union territories. What are the solutions? Modernization of Central Armed Police Forces and setting up dedicated R&D wing in each force, and workshops on stress management through yoga and meditation should regularly be undertaken, and construction of roads of operational significance in border areas. Next is defense indigenization. Need for self-reliance. Security concerns, territorial disputes with China and Pakistan, insurgency in Jammu and Kashmir, northeastern states, left-wing extremism, and a regional power to act as a net security provider in the region, and economic benefits, reduce dependency on arms imports, reducing current account deficit, and advancement in technology to improve armed forces, war fighting capabilities, development of new weapons. So keep this in mind. Next is India's defense industrialization can be divided into 5 different phases from independence to mid 1960s. Ordnance factories of British India formed the core of the state-led defense industry, and from 1960s to 1980s, self-reliance replaced self-sufficiency, license production, and direct purchase predominant course. From mid 1980s till the early 2000s, focused towards co-development and co-production with foreign companies. From the mid 2000s to late 2014, 100% participation of the private sector allowed, and from 2014 to present, self-reliance through Make in India initiative, greater degree of political and bureaucratic will, greater participation of the private sector, and India ranks 4th. Okay.
Why?
In self-reliant arms production capabilities as per SIPRI, 5 largest military spenders in 2022 were US, China, Russia, India, and Saudi Arabia. So remember this. Issues in achieving the self-reliance in defense manufacturing. Huge import dependency. As per SIPRI, India was the world's biggest importer of major arms in 2018 to 2022. An absence of an overarching policy framework and mechanisms to monitor self-reliance, lack of synergy among stakeholders, and lack of investment in R&D, lack of private sector participation, and discrimination towards the defense manufacturing sector vis-a-vis other sectors, and recent initiatives taken to promote self-reliance. Draft Defense Production and Export Promotion Policy 2020 and Defense Acquisition Procedure 2020, and positive indigenization list for which there would be an embargo on the import, and Technology Development Fund to promote self-reliance in defense technology and defense industrial corridors. Strategic partnership model with global firms to seek technology transfers, and mission deep space, that is IDEX scheme, and Srijan portal to facilitate indigenization by Indian industry. So remember this. And what are the way forward? Adopt 5 I's, that is identify, incubate, innovate, integrate, and indigenize to accelerate progress, and create a data bank to estimate self-reliance to enable monitoring of progress made, and Defense Modernization Fund exclusively for the procurement of key defense assets, and conducive financial framework to nurture and develop the defense production sector, and dedicated defense specific universities to meet the skilled human resources requirement, and fostering innovation through Board of Research for Advanced Defense Sciences. And next is the third positive indigenization list. Recently, Ministry of Defense approves third positive indigenization list for defense public sector undertakings. Ministry of Defense approved third PIL of 780 strategically important line replacement units. These are currently being imported from various parts of the country or various countries of the world. These components will be procured from domestic industry after a ban on their import kicks in under the timeline from December 2023 to December 2028. Indigenization of these items will be taken up under Make category on Defense Acquisition Positioning 2020, such as the priority categories and indigenous consent, prioritized category and indigenous consent contents, that is by Indian IDDM, indigenously designated, developed and manufactured, and under indigenous contents, that is indigenous design more than 50%, and prioritized category on buying of Indian industry more than 50% if indigenous, else more than 60%, and buy and make Indian more than 50% of make portion and transfer of critical technologies from foreign vendors as per specified range, depth and scope by global manufacture in India more than 50%, and by global foreign vendor none, and Indian vendors more than 30%. So keep this in mind. And about Defense Acquisition Procedure 2020, it superseded Defense Procurement Procedure of 2016, silent feature of DAP 2020, notification of positive indigenization lists in respect of weapons or platforms, and increased indigenous content in various categories of procurement, and highest priority to procurement under by Indian or IDDM category, and reservation of MSMEs and small shipyards for orders up to rupees 100 crore per year. And what are the significance? To make India a global defense manufacturing hub, reduce dependence on imports, boost overall economy, ensure timely acquisition of military equipment to modernize and improve capabilities of the armed forces, and defined role for private sector. About the INS Vikrant. INS Vikrant was India's first aircraft carrier bought from UK and commissioned in 1961. It played an important key role in several military operations, such as including 1971 war with Pakistan before being decommissioned in 1997. Vikrant is the largest warship ever been built in the maritime history of India. The first indigenously and the facts about the first indigenously designed and built aircraft carrier for Indian Navy, and it is designed by Indian Navy's in-house warship design bureau and built by Cochin Shipyard Limited. So remember this. And significance of aircraft carrier: significant boost to self-reliance and enhanced capabilities. Such warships enhance the Navy's capability to travel far and carry out domination operations, including air interdiction, anti-surface warfare, and increased strength. The commissioning of INS Vikrant adds India's name to a small group of nations with the ability to manufacture elite naval assets and project India's power overseas net security provider. It is important amid India's bid to be a net security provider in the Indian Ocean region and deterrence. Aircraft carriers act as a deterrent and will boost India's defense as well as attack in a conventional war against enemies, especially in wake of rising China's presence in IUR. and submarines in India. Next is submarines in India. And before earlier this, the India-China carrier comparisons. Simple. The INS Vikramaditya commissioned in 2013, Loani 2012. This is 45,000 tons and China 66,000 tons. INS Vikrant 45,000 tons and China's Shandong 2019 commissioned 70,000 and in 2020 Fujian 85,000 tons. So here China is more capable than India in terms of the aircraft carrier, but we are also producing more than two aircraft carrier, which are last is ongoing build. Okay, and next is submarines in India. Remember the Project 75 India submarine project citing difficulties to fulfill project conditions. What are the major concerns with the project? No prototypes. The transfer of technology, stealth technology, state-of-the-art submarines equipped with the powerful missiles requirement is more important. The safety penalties. Construction is to be done in India and high penalties have to be paid by original equipment manufacturers in case timelines are not met. And Project 75I. What is this? In 1999, the Cabinet Committee on Security approved a plan for Indian Navy to induct indigenously build and induct submarines by 2030, which was classified into two phases, that is P75 and P75I. Under the first phase of P75, signed in 2005, India and France signed contract for building 6 Scorpion class submarines, and these submarines have capability of operating in a wide range of naval combat including anti-warship and anti-submarine operations, indigenous gathering and surveillance, and naval mine laying. And 5th Scorpion class submarine Vagir was delivered to Navy recently, so you can remember this. The INS Vagir has been inducted in Navy. Okay, P75I phase envisages construction of 6 conventional submarines with better sensors and weapons and air independent propulsion system. And independent propulsion system, air independence propulsion system allows non-nuclear submarines to operate without access to atmospheric oxygen, and it allows submarines to stay for longer hours in water and decreases the noise level. So you can remember the classification of submarines. There are 3 types of submarine in India: submersible ship, ballistic nuclear missile submarine, nuclear powered attack submarines, and diesel electric attack submarines. So these are the static portion, so you can pause the video and read 1 to 2 times. Okay, and these are the importance of submarines for India. Okay, so operational, survivability and deterrence, responsiveness and endurance. So you can remember these 4 importance of submarines for India. Okay, and next is issues with India's naval build-up, delays and aged fleet, and contractual obligations. Okay, and limited endurance, lackadaisical development, and lack of infrastructure and inadequate funding. So remember this. And what is the conclusion to enhance the submarines? As most of the India's submarines are over 25 years old. There is a need to fast track submarine building plan in India for our own maritime security and also to counter Chinese presence in the Indian Ocean in the coming years. So remember this. And next is the defense modernization. The defense modernization is the upgrading and adopting new technologies or platforms to counter emerging challenges. It reflects country's military capabilities and capacity to defend itself against the hostile countries. It is continuous process based on threat perception and operational challenges and focus is on acquiring latest military technologies from international markets as well as manufacturing them indigenously. And next is the need of defense modernization. Challenging strategic environment like China's presence in Indian Ocean, inadequate number of equipments like aircraft, submarines, etc., and achieve the foreign policy goals of being a regional power and a net security provider, and rapidly changing landscape of warfare like hybrid warfare, building R&D capabilities for military technology and altered nature of border threats like rapid construction by China near Indo-China border and enhancing human assistance and disaster response capabilities. And steps taken by India to challenge the uh, defense modernization. For defense production and indigenization steps like defense acquisition, positioning 2020, positive indigenization and region portal and mobilizing finance for defense and allowing 74% FDI under automatic route and 100% through government approval. So remember this. Preparation for space warfare, mission Deep Space Mission Shakti and restructuring or integration of armed forces, creating integrated threat command, Agniveer scheme, chief of defense staff and corporatization of ordnance factories. And Indian Army is working on creating battlefield surveillance system for swift decision making. So remember, and what are the challenges faced in defense modernization? Slow decision making process, limited public sector, and lack of investment in research and development, and absence of a concrete defense industry based, and limited discourse on nature of future warfare, limited technology transfer like recent cancellation of P-75I project with Russia. And what are the way forward? Fostering innovation through Board of Research for Advanced Defense Sciences as suggested by Rama Rao Committee, and providing hand-holding to private sector and adopting the concept of 5 I's, that is identify, incubate, innovate, integrate and indigenous to accelerate progress and development of industry defense academia linkages and looking at defense modernization in an integrated manner in conjunction with infrastructural modernization. So remember this. Next is Technology Development Fund. Recently, limit of funding of the innovative defense projects under the Technology Development Fund has been raised to rupees 50 crore per project from the present limit of rupees 10 crore. And this Technology Development Fund scheme executed by the Defense Research and Development Organization, that is DRDO, and Technology Development Fund aims to create an ecosystem for promoting self-reliance by building indigenous state-of-the-art systems for defense application. Next is key features of the scheme. Promoting self-reliance in defense technology and boost to MSMEs and startup and better funding mechanisms. And last is the relaxed criteria. Under relaxed criteria, limited to the development of technologies or prototype of product having potential use for the services with a typical development period of 2 years. So remember this. Okay. Next is emerging technologies in defense, such as blockchain, Internet of military things, and cyber warfare capabilities, robotics and autonomous systems, and quantum technology, and immersive technologies, additive measures, 3D printing, like additive manufacturing, and artificial intelligence and 5G. So these are not discussed with a broad manner. So you can write in your answer with effectively about these emerging technology. Okay, next is technology and border management. Indian Army is working on converting the entire fence along 700-kilometer stretch of line of control into a smart fence to improve surveillance and check infiltration. A role of integrating technology in border management, complementing existing systems that is fully dependent on human surveillance, and this makes border management a time consuming and complex task. And checking infiltration facilitate cross border trade, improved intelligence inputs, surveillance through remote sensing satellites, radar satellites, satellite with synthetic aperture radar. Okay, and Madhukar Gupta Committee on Border Protection had recommended the Union government to strengthen border protection and address survivability or vulnerabilities in fencing along the Indo-Pak border. The challenges in deployment of technology in border areas, infusion of large amount of fund for acquiring the technology, and underutilization of existing infrastructure such as detection, surveillance, and communication technologies as well as physical structures, and lack of technical expertise and adverse terrain that water bodies across borders create certain difficulties like changing course of the river, difficulty in detecting intrusions. 12.36% of the Indo-Pakistan border is riverine, while 37% of the Indo-Bangladesh border is riverine. Also, erratic power supply in such terrains hinders a smooth working of the technology. What are the way forward? Sharing financial burden. Follow the US-Mexico border where both the countries have jointly developed border areas and capability building. Manpower must be trained beforehand and prompt service backup of equipment should be in place, and private sector participation and continuous upgradation and knowledge exchange and experience sharing with the international border guarding forces can also be taken into consideration. So remember this. And drones in India. Recently, Government of India prohibit the drone import except the some circumstances such as research and development. Okay, what is drone? The drone is a layman technology for unmanned aircraft or unmanned aerial vehicle, an aircraft which is intended to operate with the no pilot on board. What are the applications of drones in each sector? In agriculture, forest and wildlife, and urban development, healthcare, and traffic management, homeland security, disaster management, and mining. So remember this. Okay, so these are the applications in agriculture, forest and wildlife, urban development, healthcare, traffic management, homeland security, disaster management, and mining. Need for drone regulations, addressing policy gaps to balance between security concerns and legitimate usage of drones in a variety of civilian sectors, and quality control and standardization as a sizable percentage of India's drones continue to be imported, and rising use of drones for various sectors such as agriculture, forest and wildlife, healthcare, mining, disaster management, and addressing privacy question as drones can collect data and images without drawing attention, and terrorist threat management as there have been several instances to know terrorist organizations using them to carry out their activities. Steps taken to regulate and mitigate security risk of drones at drone rules 2021 to increase ease of compliance for unmanned aviation industry and ensure safety and security. Ministry of Civil Aviation had issued national counter rogue drones guidelines to deal with the rogue drones, and government set guidelines for anti-drone guns to be deployed by security forces and detect and destroy technology for drones developed by DRDO. And Drone Amendment Rules 2022 were notified abolishing the requirement of a drone pilot license. Digital sky platforms like DGCA, that is Directorate General of Civil Aviation for drone management, and regulations on drone market as government banned the imports of drone in some circumstances, except except for research and development, defense and security purposes. So remember this. And what are the way forward or security concerns with the drone that is regularly used to drop weapons and drugs along the Punjab border, and conventional radar systems are not meant for detecting low-flying objects. Technology is easily accessible to terrorist groups, and it also provides them the capability of air strikes. And drones are relatively cheaper, compact and smaller in comparison to conventional weapons, and yet can achieve far more destructive results, and they can be controlled from a remote distance and does not endanger any member of the attacking side. What are the solutions or way forward? An international process to define the limits of what is acceptable with respect to the possession and use of drones is urgently needed. Governments should come up with laws that enable innovation but restrict infringements on privacy and misuse of airspace, and rectify classification of unmanned aircraft systems under the UAS rules, and increment approach in integrating drones in the armed forces. So remember this. Next is military applications of drones. That applications, what are the need for autonomous drones by Indian forces, that is border surveillance, regional security and technological supremacy in warfare, great war fighting abilities because of drone technology, and reconnaissance and tactical support, and issues with development of autonomous drones in warfare, dehumanizing warfare, okay, absence of accountability and risk of shared liability and doctrinal paradox, and limitation in users of current drone capabilities. So remember this. And what is the conclusion? Indian armed forces are on their evolutionary curve and should follow an incremental approach in integrating autonomous drones in combating systems while technology absorption in the armed forces has matured, and large gap that still exist in the development of critical technologies and military logistics agreements. India and Vietnam have signed a logistics support pact to allow militaries of both sides to use each other's bases for repair and replenishment of supplies. And what are the military logistics agreement between two countries? Administrative arrangements that would facilitate replenishment of fuel, rations and spare parts, as well as berthing and maintenance for each other's warships, military aircraft and troops during port visits and joint exercises. Okay, what are the benefits of military logistics agreement? Expanding India's military reach. That is, in logistics exchange memorandum of agreement provides India access to US military facilities in Djibouti, Diego Garcia, Guam and Subic Bay. So remember this, and saves time and cost of the lengthy bookkeeping exercises that the militaries have to otherwise do with each visit, and enhanced cooperation and greater interoperability between nations during activities such as the peacekeeping operations and HADR and strategic importance. It permits a country to project power away from its borders in international waters and edge to Indian Navy. And conclusion, India sealed away from concluding military logistic agreements for more than a decade, but changing geopolitical situation and an assertive China has facilitated India's embrace of like-minded partners across the Indo-Pacific, including through logistics agreement. So remember this. Next is the uh, theaterization of armed forces. What are the features of the bill? Bill was introduced in Lok Sabha in 2023. That inter-services organization, that is command, control and discipline bills. Features of the bill: inter-services organization. It will be body of troops including a joint services command consisting of persons subject to Air Force Act 1950, the Army Act 1950 and the Navy Act 1957 or any two of the said acts. And objective of the bill: Commander-in-Chief or officer in command of inter-services organization to exercise disciplinary or administrative control over the service personnel under their command irrespective of their services will be empowered. Next is theaterization and its purpose. The theaterization refers to the integrated or joint theater commands where all the manpower and assets of the Indian Army, Navy and Air Force will be under single operational control in a geographical region across the world. Globally, over 32 nations including US and China have adopted jointness. In comparison, Indian Armed Forces function with 17 single service command, Army, Air Force and Navy. Despite JTCs like structural changes recommended since Kargil Review Committee of 1999, and few minor steps are taken towards the armed forces integration. The significance of theaterization for India. In 2021, the terms CDS proposed for joint theaterization for India. Joint Theaterization Committee, Air, Maritime, Western and Eastern for jointness in operations and create a unified approach against potential security threats from Pakistan and China. So remember this. And improved functioning of inter-services organizations, for instance, overcoming time-consuming administrative deliberations among services and overcome budgetary constraints towards defense modernization by pooling of resources and saving resources for capital expenditure and prepare for future wars in front of the assertive China as well as the Pakistan terrorist activities. Improve the efficiency of military operations through prompt and one-point military advice with other benefits such as prioritizing defense procurement and better acclimatization and training of troops. What are the challenges of theaterization? Declining military spending. In 2023-24, the defense budget was merely 1.97% of the projected gross domestic product against 2.5% of 2010-11. Inter-services frictions. Some experts believe that JTC is an attempt to subordinate IAF, Indian Air Force, to create threat commanders and obliterate its individual identity as a service and dynamic nature of security threat. turbulence in exercise existing structures with concerns over the role of three service chiefs, lack of self-reliance in defense production, and absence of national security strategy to provide effective direction and promote optimal utilization of military sources. And what are the way forward or solutions to increase the theaterization of Indian Air Force or Navy? Okay, next way forward is the national security strategy. In modern democracies, national security strategy would provide definite objectives as well as political direction on strategic challenges and facilitate research and development for greater introduction and reliance on technological forces, assets and capabilities like use of next generation weaponry, artificial intelligence and other disruptive technologies. Next is Chief of Defense Staff. Recently, Chief of Defense Staff is appointed of Lieutenant General Anil Chauhan. Okay, and what is the Chief of Defense Staff? It was approved in 2019. Is the head of Army, Navy, and Air Force, and is 4-star military officers. So this is the static portion, so you can remember on its own, and you can read the challenges for CDS. And next is Agnipath scheme. Agnipath scheme. Union Cabinet approved the Agnipath scheme, a recruitment scheme for Indian youth to serve in the armed forces. Under Agnipath scheme, a major defense policy reform to usher in a new era in the human response policy of the three services. Idea of short-term recruitment model or tour of duty was first mooted around 2 years back for the selection of officers and Jawans for a limited number of vacancies. And youth from 17.5 years of age group selected under this scheme will be known as Agniveers, who will be enrolled for a period of 4 years. They would form a distinct rank in the armed forces, different from any other existing ranks, and upon the completion of 4 years of service, Agniveers will be offered an opportunity to apply for permanent enrollment in the armed forces, and up to 25% of each specific batch will be enrolled in regular cadre, means in next front, based on objective criteria including performance during their 4-year engagement method or engagement period. What are the concerns related to a scheme? Building cohesion. Time period for Agnipath is too short to build cohesion, as it is built over a long period of training and might not attract best candidates, as they are likely to apply for more permanent and venues like police or paramilitary forces first. Unfair to the potential recruit, as the absence of a continued employment guarantee at the expiry of 4 years could be demoralizing. An untested scheme, that there has been no independent study, pilot project and test run to ascertain the viability of the scheme, and potentially militarize the society with their ambitions of serving in the military for a full 15 years. Frustrated and unemployed, the demobilized Agniveers would fall prey to the lure of crime syndicates and radical political outfits and disturbing the regional balance. What are the way forward? A scheme needs to be linked to other manpower management related reforms based on optimization, reduction of manpower and restructuring organizations. And educational qualification can be raised to 10 plus 2, and a more stringent all India merit driven entrance examination with psychological tests. And next is The amendments such as the extension of their initial service period and mandatory re in re-enlistment of at least 50% of Agniveers as recommended by some veterans could be considered, and to ensure that Agniveers are absorbed gainfully in the society, lest they become a potential threat to the society, and incentivize this new scheme. For instance, in US, the short-term duty soldiers undergo education at government expense. So you can remember. And these are the Agniveer do after 4 years. What will an Agniveer do after 4 years? Many will get selected to the permanent cadre in the armed forces. For the rest, get a financial package of about rupees 12 lakh and a head start in life. For those wishing to be entrepreneurs, and priority under bank loans scheme for those wishing to study further, class 12 equivalent certificate and bridging course of choice for further studies, and for those wishing to work, given priority in CAPF, Assam Rifles and Police and Allied Forces in several states, and tangible skills and work experience in different facets including engineering, mechanics, law and order, and major companies and sectors. IT security engineering have announced they will prefer hiring a skilled and disciplined agniveer. So here I will end the lecture. Okay, and next and last lecture will be tomorrow, and end the internal security portion. So before end the lecture, I want to tell you that our new initiative for 2024, that from since 10th October 2023, our new initiative will be launched as anthropology optional. That is, best experienced faculty you can grab the knowledge from him, because this is a very crucial initiative for 2024 UPSC optional paper. So here, and also GS paper, GS first, GS second, GS third and GS 4 paper will be delivered and announced the date for the UPSC 2024 exam. So thank you for watching. Have a good